right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming this evening. Tonight we're going to have a work session on a subject matter that's very important to all of us, and that's the third bridge across the Willamette River. And I am pleased to acknowledge the Oversight Committee that worked so diligently on this, and of course our Salem City Council. We also worked very hard for a long period of time in coming up with what we termed the Salem Alternative. So we're going to start this session, I believe, with a staff report from our Director of Public Works, Peter Fernandez. And I think right before we do that, if you don't mind, Peter, if the other members of the Oversight team would like to just introduce themselves. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Kathy Clark. I'm a counselor with the City of Kaiser, and I've been a member of the Oversight team, I think, since about 07 or 08.
Okay. Craig Pope, Polk County Commissioner, Oversight team member for the last 3 years, I think. And I'm thrilled to be a part of it, and it's a really tough challenge. There's a lot of moving parts to this thing, but I'm hopeful that we all come together on something that at least provides us a pathway for our kids and our grandkids to be able to provide alternative transportation options for the future.
Great. Thank you very much. Mr. Fernandez.
Thank you, Mayor. And Councilor Clem is also the city's representative on the Oversight team. There are two other, Sonny Chickering, who is the ODOT Region 2 manager, is expected to join us, right? So he should be here shortly. He's also on the Oversight team. And then there's a couple of members that were invited but could not make it. So I think it'll be a great opportunity for discussion, because I don't think the council's had the opportunity to have the discussion directly with the Oversight team. What we'd like to do tonight is just go through the process of there was Alternative 4D. Council did a lot of work on discussing what the council wanted to recommend back to the Oversight team. So I want to briefly go over what that was, and then what the Oversight team decided as a part of the recommendations, how the Salem City Council's recommendations were adopted into the current preferred alternative. Then I want to visit with you a little bit about the bridge type and the bridge type decision that the Oversight team made. Then talk a little bit about mitigation measures. So beyond bridge type, there's a lot of work, even after the EIS is completed, there's a lot of work that will still remain to be done with respect to design. And really it's in bridge design that a lot of aesthetic features, a lot of decoration, a lot of other issues can be addressed. And there's still an opportunity, a very important opportunity, for the council to influence the policies and the mitigation measures that will go into the EIS to address those kinds of issues. So it's important that we as a community remain engaged in the EIS process, especially at this point. Then we got some pictures to show you about what this bridge type looks like, how this bridge type can be decorated, and not every picture that we're going to show you are pictures that Julie and I went through them, and Mike Jaffe from SCATS helped us. They're not recommendations from us. They're not necessarily, a lot of the aesthetic is not necessarily our personal preference for the aesthetic, but we just want to show you a broad brush of what is possible. And frankly, we're not going to ask you to tell us, or to tell the Oversight team, the aesthetic. What we really are recommending to you is that you encourage a policy and a funding source for this kind of aesthetic to be included in the EIS, so it can be addressed later on in design. And then we'll talk a little bit about next steps, and a little bit about the East Bridgehead, which I've heard from some of you is a concern. So we'll talk a little bit about that and what some options are on the East Bridgehead. Julie Warnicki is sitting right here next to me because she is the co-project manager, along with Dan Fricke. Dan, raise your hand. Thank you, from ODOT. I've asked her to kind of fill in some gaps if I either don't say enough or say something incorrectly. So she will be chiming in, and she'll be chiming in with my blessing. Okay, so first thing to remember, of course, is that 4D was kind of the original draft preferred alternative. 4D was not well liked by the community or the council, and the council rejected 4D as the preferred alternative and recommended what then was termed as the Salem alternative. The City Council input to support the Salem alternative included keeping the improvements for the most part at grade and not with that viaduct on Marine Drive, maintaining the greenway and the redevelopment potential along Edgewater Street in West Salem, minimizing the piers in the water, asking the oversight team to consider a signature bridge type, making sure that the neighborhood east of Liberty Street on the east Bridgehead be protected, and to eliminate all of the street improvements, and there were significant numbers of street improvements, especially in West Salem, that were not already listed in the Salem Transportation System Plan in support of 4D. So just keep it to the Salem the projects that were already on the Salem Transportation System Plan. So that's just by way of review. What the oversight team did in selecting the preferred alternative is they, in essence, adopted the Salem alternative with some specifics. And one of them was that there be a direct connection to Highway 22. And you see the ramps. I know this is hard to see. That's why I printed the slides out for you. But you know, the overhead ramps that connect Highway 22 onto Marine Drive, that Wallace Road at Edgewater be widened a little bit. I'm sorry, at Orchard Heights thank you. Wallace at Orchard Heights be widened a little bit, and that Marine Drive be in fact constructed consistent with the Salem Transportation System Plan, so that as these ramps come down, that the intersection at Glen Creek be at grade, and then that the remaining portions of Marine Drive be at grade, and that Marine Drive end at Riverbend Road, which is exactly what the TSP says. For the bridge structure itself, the oversight team has instructed that it be 2 lanes in each direction, so 2 lanes eastbound and 2 lanes westbound, that there be a robust bicycle and pedestrian facilities included as a part of the construction, that it be able to be designed as either 1 or 2 structures, and that rather, and I think 4D had kind of a curvilinear alignment, the oversight team's recommendation, or I guess adoption, is that it be a straight alignment over the river to allow for, as council had recommended, for reduced piers in the water, and then to be able to evaluate signature bridge types. So that work was done last summer, or a year ago. So it's been a little while when in essence, the Salem alternative was adopted as the preferred alternative by the oversight team in February of this year. With respect to the East Bridgehead, the preferred alternative then also spoke to minimizing structures and ramps. And what you see here, I have highlighted the piece as the bridges, as either the one bridge, the ramps off the bridge. What is highlighted here in a little darker blue, and I've put a box around it, that is the stuff that is structural. The remainder is either in an abutment or as it comes down onto the ground. So by the time these things reach Commercial Street, these streets are at grade. So I wanted to be very specific that this is the part that's still up in the air to allow for Front Street to come under, and then these start coming down, and it's Pine Street is one way to this point, Hickory is one way from this point onto the bridge. Commercial, of course, is already one way south, Liberty is already one way north. A lot of discussion about Hickory being only a right-in, right-out to discourage through traffic through the neighborhood, and then Pine, of course, is our arterial that already exists. So the realignment of Front Street to, again, reduce the impacts of the bridge, the one-way couplet, and protecting the neighborhood. Okay. On the west side, there was the Salem alternative spoke to moving the interchange here with Edgewater, moving it over to Eola. There was a lot of discussion, a lot of analysis related to that. There are some significant issues related to that. The issues were such that the recommendation was that there's an understanding that that needs to move. We're not quite sure. The oversight team did not come to conclusion as to exactly where to move it to. But there is some policy direction related to seeking a better solution for this access, that recognizing that this is not the right place, there needs to be a better place for it, whether it's at Eola or Dokes Ferry or some other thing. And if we can remove the on-ramp, that this very long stretch of ramp that leads to the connection to Marine Drive, that could be significantly shortened to reduce the visual and possible environmental impacts to this part of the improvements. This long ramp has everything to do with the weaving, not wanting these cars to be able to move over and weave onto this ramp for safety reasons. In addition to the bridges and the roadway system, the Oversight team also spoke extensively about the bicycle and pedestrian safety. You see here that there is some policy direction related to creating separate bike and ped facilities as part of this project, and to encourage some looping. I'm going to show you some work that's already been done. And then there was also extensive work done on creating transit supportive improvements, and you see there that coordinating with transit about where to design stop locations, and to consider in the design transit supportive amenities, including the ones that you see there, so that the bridge and Marine Drive and its intersections with its connections to Highway 22 and its connections with Pine and Hickory and Liberty and Commercial be transit supportive. I know this is actually, it shows up pretty good on the slides here. So what I wanted to show you is the blue are the street improvements that are proposed in the as now the preferred alternative. I want to show you the work that's already been done for pedestrian and bike facilities. So the green is the beginning of the concepts, and this is by no means a design and by no means the final recommendation. But I wanted to make sure that the council understood that there's already a lot of work being done to connect, to think about how to connect Union Street. This is the Union Street bridge, and this is the connection that comes down. That there would be a ramp that would come up along with the ramps so that bicyclists and pedestrians can come over the Wallace Road interchange here with Highway 22, and then be able to either come down onto Edgewater or make the connection back underneath and onto the existing bridges. This is our pedestrian connection on the existing bridge, and you'd be able to make that connection right there, and then this connection along the Greenway. So just a lot of thinking is already being taken place at the EIS level, not waiting for design as to how this may be possible. Same thing on the east side. This is an attempt to start to think about, for a bicyclist coming down Commercial Street, how the bicyclists and pedestrians can not only get on the westbound bridge, but also avoid the intersections on Commercial Street. So, how they can come down and underneath the bridges and then either connect to the eastbound bridge or get back down onto Commercial Street here, again, without having to cross the interchange. This is not the only solution. There may be other solutions, but again, just starting to think about what is possible. Wanted to show the council really the results of the good work related to the Salem alternative. Under Alternative 4D, you see a summary of what the impacts would have been under the original 4D for displacements, tax lots, properties impacted, and acreage required, and how much fewer it is under the Salem alternative. So good work that's already been done, influenced by the council's recommendation. So the work that the changes have already been, that we can already see as we move forward. Okay, so as we get into, so that's the Salem alternative. So the next step is selecting bridge type. So this was the part about, select a signature bridge. And what I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about how the Oversight team went about selecting. Of course, the Oversight team members are here, and so you can get into that discussion with them here in a few minutes. But one of the things that I want to clarify is is what the oversight team has done is selected a type. So the bridge type is part of the EIS, and you can see there it establishes the general form of the load-carrying structure and the general shape. Then there is another part that comes as part of the design, and that is after the EIS, we're actually designing the facility, and then you can see what the design does, establishing size, shape, proportion of bridge elements, bringing forth aesthetic goals. And I want to show you just two pictures. Both of these are this is not the type that was selected by the oversight team, but we just wanted to show you. This example, this is a beam type bridge. They're both beam type bridges. The top is a very simple beam type, obviously in a more rural area. The lower one is a beam type bridge with aesthetic qualities put into it. So the difference between the top, which is what the oversight team has recommended, and design, or what comes later. So just to start getting a sense that there's a lot of work still to be done to get from the simple type to what is actually designed. Okay, so what the oversight team did in selecting the bridge type is they considered the council input about minimizing the piers in the water and addressing the signature type bridge. They thought about functionality, maintenance, inspection needs of the facility after it's built, constructability. They thought about the Coast Guard navigational requirements. Both channels on both sides of that island are still navigation channels that the Coast Guard administers. They thought about bridge profile. Should it be a big bridge? Should it be a simpler, a cleaner line, if you will? And they thought about costs and where we would be with respect to the cost of the structure. They looked at 5 alternatives. They pretty quickly dismissed the cable-stayed bridge. While that would have been a very signature bridge and a very beautiful bridge, the tower on the island would have been 300 feet up in the air. So the oversight team felt that it was a little out of scale for Salem. And they also, we could have rented some of it. And alternative 5, the precast concrete girder, T-girder, which really would have been the simplest, most efficient, frankly, least aesthetically pleasing of the bridge types. So that left them the 3 alternatives, 2, 3, and 4, the steel tied arcs, the cast in place segmental concrete, and the segmental precast. 3 and 4 very similar to each other. And after really some additional work that the consulting team and the staff did, the oversight team recommended the segmental precast concrete box, or what's called alternative 4A in the bridge type. So what is a segmental precast concrete box bridge? Let me show you first what it looks like. So the way it lays out, you can see that there are piers on the island. These are the navigation ways on the Willamette, and then so there's only really 4 additional piers here in the water, and then they come into the banks. Julie, I see you reaching your microphone.
I was just going to point out that this is shown as 2 structures. It could be
One.
It could be designed as 1. You would have half the number of piers, but the piers would be larger. So the square footage would be the same.
These would be thicker, if you will. So, right, and then it would still diverge here to address the traffic issues once it comes off. And then you see the center line of Front Street is right here of the realigned Front Street. And then there's the elevation. And then here is, again, thinking of the 2 pictures that I showed you previously, here's the simple elevation of the bridge. This picture, the island here is underwater. This is a winter shot. In the summertime, the island reemerges back in here. And then just some pictures of what this structure looks like. And so you can kind of see that if I go back one, so kind of these arch-looking structures, you kind of see the arch-looking structures here. This is the way the piers may look like. I'm going to show you a lot more pictures of what piers may look like. And the other thing that's important to note is that the box girder is not the Marion and Center Street bridges, which are beam bridges. So this structure is actually a box. So you can see it here under construction, and they're actually cast off-site and delivered, and then they're basically, for, to use a layman's term, they're glued together to become this kind of structure. So you don't see beams. What you see is this very clean line that goes across. So just so that the council gets a real good sense of what this kind of structure looks like. Okay, so that is the bridge type that has been selected. So then the next thing is, all right, so what about mitigation? So that's what I've shown you is very simple lines, the structural elements. So in terms of bridge design aesthetics, we can obviously talk about the visual impact. And there's a visual impact section of the EIS that policy can be put into so that that mitigation can be addressed. And the EIS can say, we want the aesthetics addressed. We don't just want simplicity. We want some more work done. Sunny Chickering can talk about some examples that they've done in Eugene where aesthetics was put into the EIS, and then there were citizens committees or technical committees that helped with that. The EIS under design aesthetics can specify the process about the committee example, and then identify parameters and key policy directives. And then we'll talk at the very end about east side impacts, and then there again, we can talk about mitigation measures related to socioeconomic and land use sections of the EIS, again specify the process and identify parameters. And one of the things that the council directed us to do was to already start looking at planning for the east side land use planning. We did attempt to get a transportation growth management grant that was not awarded to us in this round. We would expect to, when TGM comes again in a year or two, we can continue to seek out those grants. What we heard as feedback from that is, once the EIS is completed so that this process is set, that grant can possibly have a better chance of being awarded so that we know that we're headed in this direction. Okay, so just some aesthetics. The first thing is that we can certainly bring a signature feel to the precast box girder through the design of the piers. So you see here this kind of design. So you saw before what I showed you was very simple piers. Well, here's a more dramatic pier. In fact, this is very similar to the crossing of the river, so you could see what that could look like. Here's another kind of pier. This is a more complete pier, but with the middle being, done in a different color and a different texture. Here are piers that the bottoms have decoration on them, relatively simple on top. Here's a much wider pier, so this idea of doing one structure with a wider pier. So here's an idea of what those might look like, how those could be done. One of the things that the oversight team thought about with the precast girder is that it would be more streamlined, more low profile. So rather than having this effect, which is more of a squat bridge, what the oversight team was thinking about was a more elegant bridge, a little more span, a little more height from the water, because the structure here is thinner than with the other kind of structure. I've also highlighted, I'm not going to have a slide on pedestrian lighting, but you can start to see that this is another design element that we can select pedestrian lighting that is a little more pedestrian friendly or a little more attractive than just the standard aluminum, fiberglass luminaire. Lighting is another thing that can be brought to bear on the bridge, and you could certainly think about pedestrians standing on the Union Street Bridge and looking out to the north at night and being able to see something like this. Not very expensive to install, can be designed to provide a little more drama on the river crossing. Railing, this is the design for the Woodburn interchange at I-5. So this is actually a simulation that shows you what it's going to look at night and in the daytime, so you see how the railing is going to be lit. And this is railing that ODOT is using quite a bit. You see a lot of it on I-84 at the overpasses. So you see kind of, so this is a simulation. These are a couple of bridges. And what I'm really trying to show here is these aren't necessarily the same bridge type, but I want to show you railing possibilities. Abutments. So again, not the same kind of bridge, but these kinds of design elements can be included in terms of a design of how do you want to introduce the bridge to the motorists, to the pedestrians. And you can see that these two bridges are the same thing, so you can the same bridge. So you can see again, this is the kind of pedestrian lighting that we have in town, could certainly be introduced onto the bridge, as well as some abutment feature. Handrails. So many different kinds of handrails. Here's 3 examples. So as pedestrians are crossing the bridge, this is what they would feel. So instead of doing some kind of big railing like the Woodburn interchange, this would be a different kind of treatment. Overlooks, certainly many opportunities for overlooks along the bridge. We obviously have that experience at the Union Street Bridge, so we know what those can look like. These, the ramps that you saw on the pedestrian and bicycle, so we'll have some ramps that come up, so you see the nice treatment here with the wall here as the bikes and peds would come up onto the bridge. So all of these are just opportunities, and again, what I want to show you is that there are a number of opportunities. Historic railings, you saw the work that we did right out here on Commercial Street, where we recreated historic rail. This rail is actually very prevalent in Salem. We have some of it right here on High Street. And then just a little more modern interpretations of historic rails that could also be, you're obviously, we're not going to do a mishmash, so we would need a bridge architect to help us put it all together, but just some of the aesthetic possibilities. And then here is what I call the Northwest aesthetic. So this is a bridge in Olympia, Washington, and you can see what they did. This is a box girder, so it's the same bridge type, and you can see what they did with the handrail, what they did with the lamps, what they did with the overlooks. You can see the overlooks here. So, my personal opinion, a very attractive bridge. This is a much lower profile bridge. This is not going over a navigable, obviously not going over a navigable waterway, but these same kinds of elements could be introduced into our bridge. All right, a little discussion on the east side bridgehead, because as I've discussed this with councilors privately, I know that there's a lot of concern about the east bridgehead and what's going to happen. And what I wanted to turn your attention to is again remind you that this is the part that's up in the air, and it is up in the air because of the council direction that we wanted to maintain Front Street, the connection to Front Street. So the way this is laid out today is this is up in the air coming down, either coming up onto the bridge or coming down off the bridge, and Front Street actually goes down a little bit to minimize the height of the bridge as it launches. And then Pine Street, obviously to the intersections or coming off of Hickory and onto the bridge. There are some things that could be done to address the bridge some more at the east bridgehead. If council wanted to recommend that the bridge launch from the bank, so lower this part of the bridge further so that this had more of a street feel until you got to the bank, and then it would rise and go over. It's all about what we do with Front Street. So a couple of options. We can disconnect Front Street. If we disconnect Front Street, we can envision more traffic without running a model. We can envision more traffic on Commercial and Liberty, and perhaps, on some of the other streets in this neighborhood as this traffic here and here finds its way from north to south and south to north. We could recommend raising Front Street over the bridge. So this same kind of idea, the bridge would launch off the bank, and Front Street would be a gateway over the bridge. So it's really, do we want to have Front Street slightly lower and the bridge higher? Do we want the bridge at grade and then Front Street flying over? Or we could lower Front Street even further here so that the bridge is even lower. that does introduce flooding issues and pumping issues. So there are some engineering issues and then some maintenance issues afterwards. So there is flexibility. We could provide the oversight team and ODOT and ourselves with more of that, but we have to think about, there are pluses and minuses to all of them. It's just about, what we are comfortable with. But I wanted to let you know that there are options if we want to address, if that issue is a significant issue for the council, about where these entrances and exits to the bridge are and where they land here. Just a quick slide on next steps. There is a funding workshop on December 3rd. I assume everybody has gotten their invitation.
Well, the invitations went out on Friday, so if you haven't gotten it yet, you will be soon.
Getting them the next day or two, where all funding options are going to be discussed. And it's very important to get to provide our consultants with feedback about what options are really non-starters, which options are good possibilities, to provide that feedback into the EIS. Oversight team meets again on December 11th. And then if there is, if we're ready to make, if the oversight team is ready to make some final decisions, then we are on our way to making the final EIS preparation, where we'll do refinements to the impact assessments, refinements to mitigation measures, which is what we're talking about today. And then we're on to land use approvals, which there's a very tough row to hoe on land use approval, so we will be working on that the first half of 2015. And then once the land use approvals are complete, we will look to have a final EIS published and then seek a federal highway record of decision. And then, as I mentioned to you when we were going through this late last year, early this year, the license is issued, and then it's a matter of waiting for the funding so that we can fund design, and then ultimately we can fund construction, and that's a whole other process. So once again, the EIS is about getting this license granted to us and us as a region to be able to design and construct this bridge. And with that, I think we're ready for, I'm going to sit down, we're ready for questions, discussions among the groups. I do know that Mayor Commissioner Clark has her own council meeting to attend, so I think she wants to be out of here by 6:30. Is that right, Councilor?
Yes, I have a city council meeting at 7.
Okay, so with that, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. I'd like to note that one of the other oversight team members has arrived, and would you like to introduce yourself, please?
I'm Sonny Chickering. I'm the Region 2 Manager for Oregon Department of Transportation.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
All right. I think what I want to do, Peter, while your voice is still fresh near the microphone, is see if any of our counselors had questions from what you were presenting. And then after that, I'd like to go to the oversight team and give them a chance to give us some input. So were there specific questions for Mr. Fernandez? Councilor Clem?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Peter, does alternative 4A, the box, concrete box.
Right. The bridge type.
Bridge
alternative.
type, is that still consistent with the criteria council had agreed to for the Salem alternative?
Well, so my view is that the oversight team really took all of the Salem City Council's recommendations to heart and adopted them. The one point of contention, question, discussion is, does this bridge type that was selected meet the term signature bridge or not? So I think that's the area that, one of the reasons we've invited the oversight team members is so that the council can have that conversation about what was meant by signature bridge. Does it meet or not meet? Does alternative 4A meet it with aesthetics? Like we've shown here, like some of the examples that we've shown here. So that's really, I think that's the open question.
And if I could, only because we're on the subject, I'd maybe ask Sonny to comment on his advice to the oversight team. In terms of other bridge projects where they ran into this design versus functionality, I understand some citizens advisory committees were formed. Can you explain what you shared with the oversight team on how you sort of take care of signature bridge or aesthetics through further steps in the process?
Yes, Councilor, I could do that. I think my best example is the Willamette River Bridge project in Eugene. Those of you who've been down there recently, I'm sure have seen the construction over several years, but the project is now complete. We had an extensive public comment, public participation process in the aesthetics for that bridge. The bridge type selection process was actually an online voting process. So I would say that that was even a little more participatory than what we have done so far. Doesn't mean it's the right way to do it or that this was not. It's just the way that we chose to pursue that particular one. One of the problems we ran into in that one was we showed them these beautiful signature bridges, and then ultimately we couldn't afford one of them. So that was kind of an uncomfortable and awkward situation to explain, gosh, I know you voted for this one, but unfortunately we can't afford that. In this case, it could have been a situation where we had shown these bridge types, and all of a sudden the one bridge is too high and it's in the flight path of the airport, and therefore we can't do that, and we had to take that back. So, you know, there's pluses and minuses for how much you share and when. We did have opportunity for, we called them aesthetic enhancements on the bridge, and Congressman DeFazio actually got an earmark back when we had earmarks. I believe the total was $4.5 million. I apologize, I don't have that precise number. The bulk of that money was used to do the arch supports underneath, and if you've had a chance to be down in the parks or on Franklin Boulevard, you've probably seen those arches that support the bridge. The remainder of those funds, $1.5 million, was set aside for aesthetic treatments to be determined by the community. So we set up a stakeholder committee, and it's 25 to 30 people. It was quite large. It included a variety of folks from throughout the community. It had elected officials. Their City of Eugene parks and City of Springfield parks are both on the North Bank, and there were extensive modifications made to the bicycle and pedestrian pathways that run through both of those parks, so they played a large role in these stakeholder committees. They divided themselves into subcommittees, so there was a group that looked at improvements on the North Bank, improvements on the South Bank. There was a third crossing to the north that was called the Canoe Canal overcrossing, and there were aesthetic improvements made underneath that bridge, and then we had an above deck component. And you may have seen there's two baskets, one in each direction as you approach the bridge. And then in the median, just on the north side of the bridge, there's a sculpture there that depicts some canoes and has the names of some of the tribes that were located in that area. So those are the kind of things that we did on Willamette River Bridge. It's a little different. That isn't in the core of the urban area, all right? It's on the freeway that's crossing over the river with big, expansive parklands on the north side. So there are some parallels here, I suppose. But that's the process that was used there.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt for a minute. I
Yeah.
want to make sure if there are any questions, any other questions from counselors for Mr. Fernandez. Counselor Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm intrigued by the focus on aesthetics as the discussion tonight, because this isn't a design discussion so much as, in my mind, I guess, was the scope of the bridge. And I'm trying to understand through the discussion of aesthetics and all the rest of the kind of gimcracks that can go with this, with the towers and all that. We were talking about a single bridge, and I'm now looking at a double bridge, and that's not what the Salem alternative was about. It was about limiting the scope of this project to meet primarily local needs. And I'm having some trouble kind of putting this together through the aesthetic discussion. You know, clearly you've indicated to us that any design can be beautified, and I don't think any of us doubt that, although there are limits clearly to this design and the ability to fix it up and dress it up. And what I'm worried about, Peter, is that what we're talking about with aesthetics is lipstick on a pig. And that's the part I want to understand, is what's going on underneath this thing that we ended up with 2 bridges instead of 1 in this design.
Sure. Counselor, and I think it's important to, let's go back to, so the recommendation is to have 2 lanes in each direction, and that's based on traffic modeling. So we need 2 lanes in each direction for the bridge. This bridge, this can be designed as one bridge. So there are 2 structures here, side by side. There are reasons for 2 structures side by side. These piers can be narrower. It's easier to maintain in terms of being able to go underneath it and, from the bridge itself and be able to address maintenance and inspection issues. But this can also be designed as one structure. So these things don't, visually, structurally, it's 2 structures, but it can absolutely be, it can look like one bridge. What's important to note, though, is that right here, and let me get to the east side, the picture that I have of the east bridgehead, because I think that's an important consideration. Where's my east side? Right here. Irrespective of whether this is one structure or 2, right here, so it becomes one structure, the approaches to the bridge have to be this one-way pair, because if we don't do this one-way pair, these intersections, if we just had one bridge coming all 4 lanes, just coming onto Pine Street, these intersections become quite untenable, become quite large. So what the staff, what the consultants are attempting to do here is to really minimize the amount of delay so that these are not as wide as they would have to be here with just one in both directions. So we're creating this traffic flow here, and this traffic flow here, we can turn south or turn north or keep going, so that this is still a manageable area traffic-wise and not a massive intersection here. So this can be one structure. This street still has to come in this direction, and this street still needs to come in this direction, so that this surface works. And this is being done, Counselor, and it's important to stress that this is being done to really protect this neighborhood, to keep this at a manageable level so that traffic flows smoothly. We're not backed up to here. People aren't punching through and then trying to come around here, because that's an important consideration for us in the community, to make it all work here. So yes, this can be one structure, or this can be 2 structures, but this piece here, the surface street system that leads onto and leads away from it, has to be like this for this to really work.
Yeah, and I recall those directional plans with one bridge.
Yeah, right. It can still be
Right.
one bridge.
What I worry about, I guess, is looking at it, given sort of mission creep on this constantly over the years. I mean, I'm looking back over the years that this has been discussed, that it really starts looking like the plan is for ultimately a freeway through that neighborhood. Just to be honest with you, that you put 2 bridges there, and over time, this becomes really a regional solution. Not what I'm interested in. I'm not interested in solving the big regional problem that ODOT has. I certainly am interested in solving the problems we have.
Right.
But this has never struck me as the right location for the big regional solution, that belongs somewhere north of Salem. And that bridge is a different bridge, and that freeway is a freeway. This starts to have that look, and that it has all kind of all the structure in place to become that solution. And that's exactly not what we proposed back to the committee. They had their freeway. This looks like it's coming our direction again as a freeway.
Right. I really, I don't think that is the case. I've heard your concerns, and that's why I included this slide, because if your concern is how quickly, do we want it, we worked a lot on Marine Drive. So Marine Drive is, a two-lane facility. Those ramps off of Highway 22 come down right away. We have that on the surface, so it is not, 4D was that freeway facility, and this is not what this is. But I hear your concern on the east side, and that's why I included this slide, because there is still an opportunity to make the entrances and exits to this bridge feel more like a surface street. And that's why I say, that's why this slide is so important, because it has that feel has everything to do with what we do on Front Street.
Yeah.
So if you think about Marion Center, the reason those things stay up in the air for so long is they cross Front Street, and then they dive down onto Commercial Street. We moved, working as part of, with the council, we recommended moving Front Street over and dipping it down so that that bridge can come down faster. Well, that bridge can come down even faster. I mean, it can launch essentially from the bank so that Pine and Hickory feel like a surface street. But the council has to say, we're going to do something different with Front Street, so that we can really attenuate the bridge, the entrance and exits to the bridge.
Well, I appreciate what you're saying on the east side, and then I look across at the west side section and the sort of the empty space that has not been resolved, the look of the, and we of course haven't seen it yet, but I assume we will at some point, what it would look like from Edgewater. And I'm beginning to get the feeling, when things start flying high over the top of, in order to connect to 22 the way you describe it, it becomes troublesome. It continues to have that sense of a freeway, and that's where this is ultimately headed. And I find that really troubling. I thought we had brought this down also on the West Salem side as well. And it feels, again, like it went up in the air, that it is moving around along Edgewater. I don't know whether it creates a wall on Edgewater. Certainly, it doesn't sound like it does to the extent that 4D did, which was just create a wall.
Right.
But I'm not sure what that looks like as you start to connect. This just feels like the scope of it has absolutely, again, when going from the council to the oversight team, again, gotten out of control. It goes to a resolution of a problem that was not, I don't think, on our list when we recommended the Salem alternative. So I'm really concerned about it and look forward to a clearer understanding of the impacts of this proposal compared with the Salem alternative proposal, to really understand it. But right now, this is just real disappointing. I'll just be honest with you. It really doesn't look like what we talked about.
Okay, I'm going to sort of deviate for a second here, because I know that Kathy Clark needs to leave for a meeting, and I want to give her an opportunity to speak. And then we're going to go back to the council questions, and I've got the list of counselors that wanted to speak. Ms. Clark?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As a member of the oversight team and member of the Kaiser City Council, we've been looking at this bridge and this project as a regional project. This is something that is going to benefit the folks that live and work in the Salem Kaiser area and the substantial number of folks that drive through our area from a point outside our area to another point outside our area on both sides of the bridge. The functionality of this project has been, from our point of view, very important to have as much free flow as possible, to reduce congestion, to maximize the efficiency of our system on both sides of the bridge. One of the things that was important to me personally in selecting this bridge type was looking at a way to get the best value for our dollar. This is a bridge type that is not only reasonable in cost to construct, but it also is reasonable cost to maintain. And taking the long view, knowing how tight our transportation dollars are, maintenance is a key issue. Also important to me was to be able to involve the communities at both bridgeheads in designing aesthetics that would enhance the livability on both the east and the west side, that would give opportunity for citizen input on what would affect, on what they would enjoy having, what would be a statement of the character of the communities on both sides of the bridge. They could be the same, they could be different, but it's going to be an opportunity for the kind of input to create the signature in a way that will allow the citizens to have that kind of input and create something that we can all be proud of. As far as the Front Street portion, one of the things that Kaiser has looked at is the connectivity of our bike ped systems. Having Front Street complete has been very important to me in this process because it is the opportunity to have separate and effective bike ped facilities that don't necessarily get into the middle or have to be adjacent to heavier vehicle traffic facilities. We have to have the bike ped along Commercial and Liberty, but quite frankly, as a freighty rider like I am, I'm going to be preferring to ride on Front Street where I'm not going to be that close to a semi or somebody in a jacked up pickup. It's much more comfortable for me to be on a road or for me to want to take young people along with me along a road that's close to Front Street. We've made tremendous investments with Union Street, with the connectivity now on the west side, and we want to continue, from my point of view, to continue to enhance the connections of our bike ped systems. Front Street is really important to Kaiser in that regard. Finally, from Kaiser's point of view, this is regional. We have the connection to I-5. We have the Parkway. This is a critical piece that allows the downtown to continue to redevelop the way many folks down here are visioning and are working very hard for. There are so many improvements down here in downtown Salem, so many buildings that are under renovation. And if we can allow the vehicle traffic that is moving through our region, both to the east and to the west, and allow the downtown to continue to evolve the way, at least I'm seeing, that Salem wants to redevelop, this could be a win-win. But the functionality and the effectiveness and the efficiency of this bridge, of this project, to me, is very critical from a regional standpoint. So there's my soapbox, I'm off.
Okay. Thank you. We really appreciate you taking time to be here tonight, and I know what it's like to be under the clock for another council meeting, so we appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Okay, we had some other people, Councillor Clausen, followed by Councillor Clem, then Councillor Dickey, then Councillor Nanke.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Sorry for being late.
That's all right.
Mr. Fernandez, sorry for being late. You might have covered this already, but along the lines of questioning from Councillor Bennett, questioning like we're in court. I do have a question about the size of the bridge, and is the number of lanes and the total right-of-way determined and nailed down during the EIS process?
The number of lanes is, and
Okay.
I think to some extent, well, go ahead, Julie.
I guess what I would say is that we try to, in the EIS process, go for more right-of-way than and we try to be conservative to make sure that we don't need to come out and get even more. At the design time, we then try to shrink it beyond that.
Okay, thank you. And then with you know, say if it went to maximum levels of whatever the maximum levels would be, what would the right-of-way compare? How would the right-of-way compare with the bridge as kind of the maximum level compared to, say, Liberty and Commercial Street as they currently exist?
Let me use that.
Does the question make sense, just in terms of total right-of-way?
Sure. So the intersections at, so this is Commercial Street, this is Liberty, Hickory, and Pine. You know, what you're seeing here is the maximum extent of the right-of-way that would be required. So there are, you know, there's extra lanes here to be able to turn right. I believe there's double left turn lanes here to get onto Liberty. But what you see here is the extent of the right-of-way acquisition that would be necessary.
So I'm just thinking about,
on the east side.
okay, and my understanding is the worst case scenario is at an intersection because you've got stacking and turn lanes.
Exactly.
As we see it on Wallace and, you know, Dokes Ferry. I'm looking at Councilor Clem, he's not looking at me though. Orchard Heights.
Yes.
Yeah, where we're currently, Glen Creek. There
Well,
we go.
Glen
That's the
Creek,
one I'm
where you
thinking
see,
about.
right, the double turn
You just see
lanes
it.
and stuff. Right, there's only so many ways to get in and out of West Salem, so.
So let's look at just I'm thinking about just a travel portion of the lane. How does it compare to what we have at Commercial and Liberty right now? I mean, Commercial and Liberty are major arterials right now, is that correct?
Correct, yeah, so you'd see the same number of lanes approaching here.
Generally same width?
Same, there's no difference here. This is Liberty northbound. There's no difference here as it you know, south of Pine Street. As you get to Pine Street, I think there is an extra lane. So we go to 3 lanes here, which I think the 3 lanes are up here already. So that 3 lanes would extend, you know, south of Pine. So you get 3 lanes, and then you'd have, I think this lays out as a left, a through left, and then a through, I think is what the way this lays out. And then this is 2 lanes on Hickory. So this is 2 lanes. You'd be able to make a right back onto Commercial Street if you wanted to, but then you just have the 2 lanes coming onto the bridge. You got 2 lanes coming off the bridge, and then you'd have, you know, your opportunity to, I think there's a right turn lane and 3 through lanes, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Then a left, a through left, so.
Okay.
I was just going to add that the blue shading is really where there'd be changes in lane configuration. It doesn't mean that we necessarily need additional right-of-way in those locations. I believe that the right-of-way for both Pine and Hickory is adequate. It would just be a restriping, and the same, you know, up to the north with, you know, Front Street and Commercial. It's really, there might be some sliver takes, but the main part of the right-of-way required is going to be, you got rid of the map. You
Oh,
confused
sorry.
me. Sorry.
Right here.
It is going to be west of Commercial Street. When you have to start those realignments to ramp up, that's where the right-of-way acquisition is going to be needed.
Okay. And then on the west side of the river,
Right.
then
That's why I
Marine
brought this
Drive.
up. Right, so Marine becomes, you know, there's just 1 lane coming off Highway 22, and it's right at the surface. It drops down, so this is a surface intersection. And this is a through lane, left turn lane, 1 lane northbound, 1 lane southbound, and a left turn lane. And then this is 2 lanes all through here. This is all 2 lanes. And then it widens here, and I forget, is this 1 or 2 right turn lanes?
There's a added right turn pocket, so there'll be 2 right turns.
so-
And then for the southbound, there would need to be a second southbound lane just to Beckett,
Right.
so to receive the 2 left turn
Yeah,
lanes.
so there's double left turn lanes here, and then it drops down to 1 lane to
Okay.
then be able to get on. So this is all 2 lane, as we had talked about. It does widen out at the intersection, the signalized intersection here, and then it drops back to 2 lanes up to Riverbend. So what you have is a 4-lane roadway here that comes to the intersection of Wallace Road. This 4-lane becomes a 1-way eastbound, and this 1-way westbound comes on here. Big intersection here, drops back down to 2 lanes to get on
Okay.
Highway 22.
So in boiling it down, big picture, if I was driving from the Parkway and I was driving west, or if I was driving from the west and I was driving east
Right.
up towards the Parkway, I would have a total of 2 additional lanes that I could shoot for, being Marine Drive. Otherwise, there's nothing new in terms of my ability to get from the west side of Salem to the east side of Salem. Because I'm going to be neck down on Marine Drive. Sure, I've got 4 on the bridge, but I only have 2 additional lanes to get there.
Yeah,
on.
well, this was a very important, I mean, this whole Marine Drive thing, you know, this was a viaduct. So this was all up in the air, and this was, in essence, a freeway connection onto here, and then there were ramps here. So this was a freeway connection from 4D, from Salem Parkway to Highway 22. And the recommendation from the council and what the oversight team selected, which I think is important to recognize, is that this is, other than these ramps here, this Marine Drive here is exactly the same as we have it in the Salem Transportation Plan, except for the new intersection, which then it widens to accept the extra turn lanes, because this is a signalized intersection.
And Marine Drive is a arterial? An
It's,
arterial?
right now,
Is
it's
it-
a collector.
Okay.
The plan, what the council will see at some point, is a proposal to reclassify this part of Marine Drive to a minor arterial, which does not change the number of lanes. It simply changes its functional classification.
Limits entrances
From here to
and
here,
exits.
and then collector from the bridge north to Riverbend Road.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I got my brain wrapped around that. I heard freeway, and I was like, oh boy, I know that's not what we want, and
Yeah,
collector.
the other thing is, this one-way pair here that we did on the east side was specifically so that we could get, remember there were these ramps up here that were going to come through the Realtor Association and Liberty House. All those are gone. So all that's gone, and this is all just on the surface as a one-way pair situation to efficiently move traffic out of this area, you know, down to where it wants to go.
So we see no street classifications worse than
There's no change
Liberty or
here.
commercial.
These are all arterials already. Hickory from Liberty over would become an arterial street.
but not to the east of Liberty.
No, in fact, I mentioned that in my presentation. We would propose that the east side of Hickory would become right in, right out, so to prevent traffic coming, shortcutting from Broadway across Hickory and then onto the bridge.
Okay.
You have to use Pine Street, which is the arterial.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Clem?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question earlier posed a different way. As oversight team considered the Salem alternative, the size of the intersections, the function turning to a freeway, I remember that we spoke about a lot of things, but it was just the bridge type we were picking. We didn't, is there any discernible difference between what oversight team is now recommending and the Salem alternative other than bridge type?
No.
Intersections didn't change, didn't turn into a freeway. We're routing traffic on local streets other than the ramp onto 22. We just picked the bridge type. Wasn't that the only discernible difference?
My sense, Counselor, is that the only point of difference of opinion that I can tell really has to do with this facility right here, and you know what type of facility this is right here. All of this and all of this here is exactly what the Salem alternative called for.
Sure. And in terms of the facility of the bridge itself, there's a lot of considerations: cost, functionality, maintenance. But that Salem alternative, if the perception was that that was a single bridge for this alternative 4D, type 4D, or 4A, I'm sorry, could be a single bridge.
It certainly can be.
Okay.
I think Julie mentioned it.
A picture in the newspaper showed 2 bridges, but in fact,
I think, well, I
there
think
wasn't a discernible difference
my
in decision.
understanding is that the recommendation is, let me get to it, is that it be 2 structures.
Okay.
But what we have talked about is that this can be one structure.
Okay.
And kind of the difference is, just so that council is well informed here, the differences become that the piers, when you go to one structure, the piers become
Wider.
wider, much thicker. And these are two different scales, but just to kind of get the essence, where these piers, and I know these are two different pictures and two different scales, but just to get the essence, when you go with two structures, you'll have thinner piers, two of them. When you go to one structure, you will have thicker piers, or the two structures, I believe, could be built side by side, like this one, with two thin piers just closer together. The issue, as I understand it, is that it becomes one of inspection and maintenance, where ODOT can come through and basically use a facility, an arm that goes underneath. You can't reach the middle of the bridge with that type of equipment. You know, there'd have to be a different kind of inspection if we go to this kind of thing. So that's the pitfall of one structure versus two structures,
Okay,
as
so
I understand
the
it.
bigger footprint than with two bridges would be the space between them, separating the structures if you had two, but
Right.
one structure, you save that 18 feet that would be between the
Right.
two
The other
structures.
issues that I think are good design issues to talk about, and it's really a detail, are we going to have sidewalks on both structures? Are we going to have a wider, is this structure, this southern structure, or this south side, going to have a wider, perhaps a 10 or 12 foot pedestrian and bicycle facility, and we'll just, have all of the pedestrians and bicycles on this side, so that you're connecting from Front Street, as Councilor Clark was saying, onto the walkway on Marine Drive that then leads to Wallace Marine Park and Union Street Bridge and Riverfront Park.
But those are design considerations.
Those are design issues. Do we have two substantial bike and ped facilities on both sides, just on one side, two small ones? I mean, that will start to dictate added width to the structures when we make those kinds of decisions.
Okay. Counselor Dickey?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I have a number of questions. But first, I do want to say, and I wish Councilor Clark were here to hear this, that, looking at this bridge as potentially something that would serve our entire region, I totally get that. Even if we design it as a local bridge, it definitely would have some sort of regional functionality. But our Salem residents are the ones who have to look at it every single day. Our Salem residents are the ones who will bear the brunt during construction, which will take a very, very long time. They will likely bear the brunt of the cost. And so I've said this before, I know I've said it to you, Peter, that I feel a little bit like this whole planning process is a little bit flawed. I think Salem should have more than one vote on the oversight team, but that's just my opinion, because we are the ones who will take the brunt of whatever we end up with. So I think a couple questions. One question I have is, this particular design has been said to have a lower maintenance cost. I need some context for that. Are we talking half the cost, a tenth of the cost, or just a fraction less for maintenance? Do you have any feel for that?
Mr. Chickering is is the expert.
Yeah, I wouldn't claim to be an expert on bridge maintenance. My advice to the committee when we were having our deliberations is that, in general, concrete is going to be less maintenance and less cost over the long haul. It's particularly true on the coast, which this is not, but even in the Willamette Valley, steel components corrode. You end up replacing rivets. You have to go through and blast the paint off and repaint them, those kind of things, whereas concrete, it's primarily a structural inspection, and if you observe some cracking or something, you do some kind of injection. So in general, our experience, or my experience, is that a concrete bridge is less labor intensive, less expensive to maintain in the long run. Now, it's all very site specific, and the earthquake hits, that kind of takes all that out of the equation anyway. So, but in general, that was my advice to the committee, was that a steel structure just requires a little more love, care, and attention than a concrete bridge does.
All right, thank you. So then my next question is, because I, along with Councilor Bennett, this is really very different than what we thought we were recommending this particular bridge type. And I know that we are not in the position right now to be doing bridge design. I know that comes very much later. If we start with this particular bridge type, you know, we're starting with different design, you know, initially a baseline, than if we had a different one that was being recommended. So you've talked about a lot of things that we could do. What options does this council have for locking in any of those things that we could do? Or if we start with this basic design, and does that just a future council could say, hey, we don't want to do anything? I mean, what policy direction options do we have at this point?
Let me get to the right slide here, Counselor. So my sense, and I'll let Julie and Sunny or even or Dan chime in. What we can lock in is policy. So the EIS can say, you know, we will do these mitigations. The mitigation is, you know, we're going to mitigate visual impacts through aesthetic. We're going to mitigate visual impacts through aesthetics, and we will assign a certain amount to it. And my understanding is we can say through a percentage or a not less than X amount of dollars. So that is, at this stage of the game, what we can do is lock in policies that will say, you know, we want this bridge to be good looking and we want to address its look later. I don't know how much detail in an EIS we can put in about, you know, do we want a certain kind of handrail or do we want a certain kind of lighting? But I think we can put in statements related to, you know, we want pedestrian scale lighting, we want the aesthetic to be attractive, we want pedestrians to feel comfortable on this bridge. And then on the east side, you know, addressing the concerns that I know I've heard from you and we've heard from Councilor Bennett. I think there's still time to, beyond bridge type, to discuss what we want to do on the east side. The streets are ours, so we can talk about what we want from our streets. And, you know, do we want the bridge launching, you know, a little further west? And when you see this, this plan view, get to the right plan view here, right here. You know, you see that the bridge, you know, here's the embankment. Yeah, here's the embankment and the bridge, or the bank, and the bridge, you know, starts coming up and over. You know, we can have the bridge come off of right here and then climb up, but we have to decide what we want to do with Front Street, because you see that it's climbing over Front Street here, and that was something that we expressed was important to us, that Front Street be there. So if we're concerned about this looking like a freeway entrance, that we really want it to feel more like a street entrance, then we, the city of Salem, the city, through the city council, need to talk about what we want here. And that can be deeper, that can fly over, that can be disconnected. I mean, there's any number of things that all come with pluses and minuses if this is a concern to us, right here. This, so that it launches from here instead of from back here. And that, and we can certainly have, we still have time to have that kind of input into the process.
Just one more. Thank you. All right, thanks. And I guess my last question for now is, we talk about the Bridgehead, and, you know, we've thrown around all sorts of things that we can do. What I'm wondering is, where is that in terms of the whole entire process? In other words, if we come up with some fantastic plan for the Bridgehead, do we pay for that at the City of Salem, or is that included in the whole bridge project? So if this is all part of the project, all the mitigation, everything.
Everything that's blue is part of the project.
So we want to put a interpretive center at, I mean, I'm not saying we'll do that, or some crazy thing like that at the Bridgehead. That's something that's involved in the project. I'm just trying to get a feel for what's on our backs and what can be part of the process.
So what is ultimately on our backs is, what do we want to do with the land on the east side and the west side? How do we want to zone that? You know, what do we want to encourage? I mean, those are absolutely local government questions that we will have to ask ourselves. You know, we talked about the TGM grant, you know, we're going to seek that out again so we can begin to answer those questions. In terms of aesthetic, you know, how the bridges are designed, what kind of decoration we want to put on the bridge, and what kind of improvements, street improvements, accept the traffic from that bridge or allow the traffic to go onto the bridge. That's all part of the project. So now, what we've talked about before, just because I want to be clear, is that, let me apologize for flipping back and forth, but you know, all these pictures are here. So what we've talked about is Marine Drive has always been a city street. So what we've talked about is there's money in the bond to begin to acquire right-of-way for Marine Drive. What the bond, what the council subcommittee for the bond has instructed us is that we wait on spending that money until we get, you know, a final EIS so that we know what we're buying. The start of Marine Drive could be the city, so we could come in and start building Marine Drive from, say, Glen Creek up to, you know, some point here, because there's benefit to the city to get that done ahead of time. So that is something that it would either come as part of a big project, or if the project's delayed and we want to move forward as a city with this improvement, we could certainly do that. And some of these connector streets, and that's something that you would probably see coming, you know, if this takes as long as I think it's going to take with respect to funding. But in terms of the improvements related to Hickory and Pine Street, this East Bridgehead, the improvements or the realignments of Front Street, the big intersection here, this piece of what would be the extension of Hope, all that's part of the project. So as well as whatever decoration, aesthetics, bike ped facilities, all of that is part of the project.
All right, thanks.
Okay. Councilor Nanki.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Two questions. One in regards to the new exit someday on the West Salem side. Well, we'd recommended the OLA. How did the EIS encompass and take into consideration that exit or a future one, and what will the process be
Right.
to
So that could
determine
be,
where that ends up being,
Sure.
and who has jurisdiction over that at what points in time?
that is an Oregon Department of Transportation facility, Highway 22. You know, we recognize that interchange today is a very antiquated facility. Lots of accident history, you know, this left in and you veer off and you come to a signal. So something screams to be done there. My understanding, and I'll let Julie jump in, is that really deciding on another interchange can be its own EIS of,
Okay.
you know, this is a federal aid facility, so that really could be its own EIS of where it ultimately goes. So rather than delay this process, what the oversight team said is, we recognize that we agree with the Salem City Council that there is a better way to do this. We recognize that there is a better option further west, but rather than embark on this whole other sub-EIS or this whole other EIS, there's simply this policy language that says, seek a better solution. We know we need to seek a better solution. Go do that. Julie.
Can I add one other? So the length of the facility as it comes on the northbound to swing over and make the connection up to Marine Drive,
Yes.
that distance is not included in what will
This
be the
is-
current EIS?
Yes, everything that's blue is in the EIS.
but we
Okay.
wouldn't necessarily have to build all of that even though it's in the EIS.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
just to verify
So
that.
Julie, clarification.
Right. The ODOT has committed to doing a facility plan for this section of Highway 22 from Dokes Ferry into the bridges. It's something that's been on their work plan as needed for
Right.
quite a number of years, and they put it on hold pending the outcome of this EIS. When the council had been discussing it, the direction was, well, move it to Eola because that seemed to make sense because that's our minor arterial. There's just a lot more questions. It goes outside of the scope of the, EIS project. Is college better than, Eola, whatever? And so that was the reason for pushing it off. And as Councilor Clem mentioned, is that from the EIS perspective, we're trying to show the biggest impact possible. And so that's why we show that ramping here. But when we get to that point, we would much rather not build all of that ramping.
Right. Second question. The double bridge structure and the potential to join them into a single span per se. Seismic issues involved with two independent facilities or connecting them together, which has the most seismic stability.
Yeah, I mean, unless Sunny wants to say something else, anything that's designed here, whether it's a single structure or a dual structure, will be designed to the latest
But
seismic.
one will
and-
be more expensive than the other. Seismic-wise, will it not?
I don't know that I can say yes to that. Do you have any sense of that, Sunny or Tim?
Yeah, I'm not a bridge designer, so I can't answer your question about the relative cost of one bridge versus two, but I can tell you that I can confirm Mr. Fernandez is correct. Both designs, either design, would be to current earthquake standards. So from an earthquake standpoint, they will resist equally.
Okay, yeah, and my concern would be with the multiple different piers and how
there's a
that
lot
might
of-
affect them and how they pull against each other when you have.
Bridges are being designed all over the world to address this issue, much wider and much bigger than this.
Oh,
So
definitely.
when the day comes, that'll be designed, whatever we ultimately choose to do, that'll be designed appropriately.
Councilor Bennett?
Just to kind of go along on this seismic discussion, one of the other parts of our recommendation, as I recall, was to encourage ODOT to complete or speed up or whatever it would be, the seismic upgrade of the existing bridges. Assuming you're correct, we're a long way away from this project. And
Oh, yes.
and we have, I guess I'm looking at a report that indicated we're looking a long way out, actually longer than we think the threshold is for building this bridge before seismic upgrades, or the kind of seismic upgrades I think we had in mind for those bridges occurs, plus just the resurfacing of those bridges, just to bring them up to standard. You kind of hate to see all the eggs in this basket. We've still got two bridges here that are getting into rougher and rougher shape, it feels like. At least that's what my constituents tell me. I mean, I don't know how many tires people claim to lose. I don't know how many they really lose, but there's a lot of people that feel like they're putting pretty heavy wear on their tires, on center in particular.
And it's not like we're going to build this one and tear those out. I mean, those are still
I
a
hope
very
not.
important
What I worry is
part of
we're
the
gonna-
system.
The plan is to build these and somehow forget about
Oh,
those.
no.
I want to make sure those are high on the list for.
Mr. Chickering manages those bridges for us.
I can assure you, we're not going to forget about the two bridges you have. We will maintain those within our funding constraints and within statewide priorities. So the report that you refer to does attempt to prioritize routes throughout the state. And there are multiple tiers.
Right.
And in that report, unfortunately, the Center and Marion Street bridges have been put in Tier 3.
which is like 30 to 40 years or something like, isn't it?
Let me drive.
Yeah, it says 20 to 30 years in my notes
20,
here, but
30,
yes,
okay.
it's a long
It
ways
just
off.
seemed like a long way off. 30 to 40, 20 to 30, at my age, it's all the same deal.
Right, and I'm with you on that one.
Yeah.
What I can do is make sure you get a copy of that report if you would like. It does go into a great deal of detail about what the tiers mean, why certain routes were put in each tier, et cetera. And I can assure you that every community like this one that has bridges over the Willamette, they'll all be wondering why they're not in Tier 1.
Yeah.
Whether it's Corvallis or Eugene or Springfield, et cetera. So there just isn't enough money anticipated to be available to upgrade all the bridges, in the
Just
time
a-
that we would like to.
Yeah. Well, to kind of circle around then to a comment from Councilor Dickey, that again, who's going to pay for this thing? I mean, it still feels like Salem pays. I haven't seen a proposal from Kaiser that says they pay, or from Polk County that they're going to contribute a whole bunch of money and pass a bond measure. And what I'm trying to, I guess if there isn't money for the upgrade of these existing bridges, how does this all get, I know you've got it coming up on December 3rd, but just theoretically, how does this happen? If we are Tier 3 with our existing bridges that are certainly obviously very important because they're there and they are the capacity for the region to move traffic. How does that all, I mean, you're going to go to the legislature for sort of a Willamette River crossing?
I think there's going to be conversation at the legislature, certainly about the seismic report, both the
Okay.
one that's been released already, and there's a seismic plus version that's coming out in the next couple of weeks. It's in advanced draft form now. I know that the seismic issue is something that we raised at the Oregon Transportation Commission just last month, where we were talking about the condition of the system, not just the bridges, but the system as a whole, and the obvious gap between our anticipated funding and all the needs that are out there. So there will be conversations taking place on a broader scale at the legislature, and I can't foresee exactly where that's going to go, or what priorities they may choose to make with whatever funds they make available to us. With regards to funding for this bridge, I'm looking forward to the meetings that are going to start in December.
Okay.
Because all along, ODOT's kind of been wondering, where is the money going to come from? It's unusual, I think. This process has sort of been done in the reverse of what I'm accustomed to. Usually we're talking about where the money comes from first, and then we decide what to do with the money that we have available. But that choice was made for solid reasons. The communities here discussed that and made a conscious choice to do it in this order. I think it's going to be fine. I don't know what the answer is, whether it's a percentage by agency or if it's a lump sum that's determined more on funding source than on responsible agency. That remains to be seen, exactly how we're going to do that.
Yeah. It is interesting. It's sort of build the head of steam and then see if you can manage it.
Yeah, my understanding, and I wasn't region manager at the time, but my understanding was, how can you have a conversation with the community about paying for a bridge if they don't understand what they're going to get for that money? So it is kind of a chicken and egg thing, right? Do you go to them first and say, give me a whole bunch of money and I'll tell you what I'm going to do with it later? Or, do you tell them what you're going to do and then ask them, is this worth it to you?
really
Do you
wanna
want to pay for this? Yeah. So I don't see anything wrong with the process been chosen here.
Yeah.
We just
Well, it'll
have to
be
do
interesting
that half of the
if you choose
equation.
this model again.
Yeah, and I think it's unique to your community, right? Your elected officials, I don't know if you were on the council at the time, but the bodies that were in place at the time talked it over and they decided this was the best thing for your community, and that's the important thing. Not that it's right or wrong for anywhere else in the state.
Thank you.
Okay, I see questions from Councilor Nanke and then Councilor Clem.
Yeah, just two quick ones. That the report where we're Tier 3, it would be nice to have a link or whatever to that.
Yeah, if we
Yeah.
can get it to Julie, we'll get it out to all of the counselors.
And then in the same light, in regards to the funding workshops and what have you, if it went in the mail, depending, we won't see it for at least a week in our mail slots unless we forget to look, and then it'll be 2 weeks. Can we just get an email?
We can. We can just get
invite
it.
and a copy
Yes.
of the thing as well?
Right, we'll just
we
get
get
it
it
on
on
your
our calendar.
calendars. Yeah.
That would be great. Counselor Clem, I think, had a question.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Having been around when this process was invented, it was really driven by what the community wanted, what the region and what Salem wanted. How do you know how much money to get unless you know what you want? That was our problem in 2006. We talked about it since 1998 through 2005, essentially, and County A wanted it here, County B wanted it here, and quite frankly, the shock to learn was that it matters what you want, but you have to make up your mind. And so we've been making up our mind for quite some time. And so we inherited this uniqueness from our previously elected officials, because it does represent the character of two counties. And Sonny, I'm given to understand that most of the projects sort of get a limited amount of funding, and then they finish a part, and then they get a Selwood Bridge. Certainly an example of two counties not agreeing on how it was going to be funded. So, the idea is for two counties and all the communities involved, particularly Salem, where it goes, agree wholeheartedly on what they have. So, Selwood Bridge provide any instruction on how not to do it?
Well, I'm going to be safe here because I don't really know anything about the Selwood Bridge. I'm sorry I can't answer your question specifically. Generally speaking, until the last half decade or so, we've had the money in advance, right, for major projects. But with JTA and the conscious decision to not have earmarks in the federal appropriations anymore, those big chunks of money just don't exist anymore. And so what we found ourselves doing is phasing projects. So the Newburgh-Dundee bypass, for example, has been split into at least 3 phases. And we ended up splitting that construction into 5 contracts, I believe, for a variety of reasons, one of which was to employ local contractors rather than bidding a huge job that they couldn't bond for. So I think that phasing of projects has become more prevalent, certainly in the last decade, and really in the last 4 or 5 years with JTA is where I really started to see it.
And this project is feasible as well, per our last oversight team discussion.
Yeah, and I would ask the staff to talk a little bit about that because I'm not sure that I can speak to it very.
Well, the phasing that we see, and Cindy, you might want to tell the council what JTA is.
Oh, I'm sorry, the Jobs and Transportation Act, it was passed by the legislature.
Okay. The only phase that I see that's really conceivable is Marine Drive. So we can build Marine Drive, the city can build Marine Drive. The bridge can be, and then once Marine Drive is built, we theoretically could put in, we could work with ODOT to build those ramps off of Highway 22. I don't see the point of building the ramps until we have a bridge, so you could certainly build the bridge once there's Marine Drive, but without the ramps, then you're really forcing everybody onto Wallace Road to be able to get, and Edgewater to get on the bridge. So it seems to me that Marine Drive is a phase that's independent, and then the bridge and the ramps really kind of go together, and then what we do with the Edgewater interchange can kind of be its own
It
phase.
seemed that if an email is going out with the seismic report, the phasing diagram that we were shown at the last oversight team meeting might be emailed out as well. I see the seismic problems with our current bridges being something the legislature, that document was created to get the attention of the legislature so that they could discern what to do today about the Marion and Street bridges, not 10 years from now, not 50 years from now, but today. Of course, it's all related because we're talking about crossing the Willamette River, but that isn't a problem that I see that intersects with with this one. That's a problem that needs solved now, whether we're Tier 3 or Tier 1. Legislature's got to find the money. It doesn't matter. So I think I see them as two separate related problems, but they've got to find the funding now for Marion Street bridges, not see it as part of some overall, how do I cross the Willamette River in 100 spots throughout Oregon?
Okay, Councillor Rogers, followed by Councillor Nanki, and then Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Mayor. I actually think my question was just answered by phasing projects in. So if I understand where we're at, when we complete the EIS, we'll have sort of a type of bridge, but not a design. And we'll have areas, which is a path that you've described, which has addressed all the environmental impacts. And then we'll design within that. And I think that's kind of where we're talking about. And then we can parcel out or project each of them in a different way where it fits. And that's kind of where my question is going. He just answered that. So I guess, are we looking in 2015 to have the final EIS completed?
I think that is our hope.
And when will the council, the Salem City Council, may have an opinion on this and make a final vote?
The next of action by the Salem City Council would be the land use decisions. And so that would be coming in 2015 to initiate, the first step would be to initiate the amendments that are required for the land use decision, and then followed by public hearings and the action on that. That is necessary before the final EIS can be released. So while the council does not have any decision-making specific to the final EIS, the action by the council to take the required land use actions, as well as by the Polk County Commission and by the regional SCATS, Metropolitan Planning Organization, all of those have to happen before the final EIS can be released. And so we can definitely share, policy language with, through the oversight team, but also as part of that land use decision. That's another place that we can capture specific policy direction that we want to ensure is reflected in the final EIS.
Good point. Yes, certainly.
So in a follow-up, when the bridge type is important for the EIS, is that because of the number of piers that come down that affect the environment? Is that, in a nutshell, it?
Right.
It's like both the cost,
Right.
the number of piers in the water, and that's not to say that it can't be revisited in the future. During the design process, you would go back and the project proponent would have to go back and reevaluate everything, and if there was a reason in the future to decide that that decision needed to be revisited, you could do that. It could be changed to another type. They would just have to do a public process and, do either a reevaluation of the EIS or a supplemental.
My last thought is Marine Drive, and part of our bridge and streets bond covered how many million? 3 million?
1.5.
Gosh, I'm overestimating that.
You're, huh?
3.7.
Well, the cost of Marine Drive, but there's only 1.5 in the bond.
No, there was 3.7.
For Marine Drive?
In the bond.
I'm thinking it's 3. So my homework, I'm going to study. Anyway, doesn't matter.
There's an amount
We
of
can
money.
spend that money today, can't we? Once.
We certainly could. Yeah.
And why do we have to wait for the EIS to be done?
We asked the oversight team, and the oversight team, the council subcommittee not the oversight team. We asked the council subcommittee that is provided policy direction for us when there have been policy decisions to be made related to the bond, and the direction back was to wait to see what comes out of this before we start spending that money.
So do we have a guideline when we did the bond that had to be completed in a certain period of time?
Yeah, that typically is related to arbitrage because we're in a world today where there is no interest being paid. There's really no arbitrage issues. We have steadily spent all of the money, so this is really the very last amount of a $100 million bond issue, so it's okay to wait. I mean, from that perspective, there's no problem.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Nanki, followed by Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Two things. One, again, being design signature bridge versus not. It was always fascinating to me in regards to the regional end of the facility. If we stick stoplights all over at both ends, you automatically create congestion. As compared to the flyovers, which is how it originally came to us, and there was a lot of discussion and a lot of compromises. But to try to get that low and then have the signature bridge that everybody could see never really made sense to me. But I'm fine with, looking at beautification or beautification. As we get to that point, how does the pedestrian bike ped element come into that? Because that was one of the things that I said, I don't really like it so much. I can see that the bridge should have something, but we just spent millions of dollars on a full separated pedestrian ped bike facility with the Union Street Railroad Bridge. I agree that there needs to be something. How, in the EIS, does it just say there will be this component in it and it's not designed?
So there are two pieces. One is there's policy direction that we talked about, and then there is already some amount of work that has been taking place, and I'll just re-show you this one, of how to get bikes and peds, basically from this point onto the bridges, and do it safely so that they're not having to cross a bunch of streets. If you're a bicyclist coming this way, how do you get on? And then obviously a miracle happens on the other side, and then the same thing, here, you come off, and obviously for bikes and peds, you can go in both directions. So there's a lot of work yet to be done, and those are really design issues.
But is that in the EIS?
Well, the EIS says there will be bike and ped facilities.
Okay.
Okay, so go ahead.
I just wanted to say that the EIS needs to suppose a footprint. And so it needs to sort of have a supposition that we're going to have this much space devoted to bikes and peds. How it's designed is a design issue. But if we don't include enough right-of-way for it, then that becomes a problem in the future.
So the red lines would involve potential right-of-way.
Are you colorblind, Councilman Yankee?
Uh-huh.
Okay, those are green.
Are you kidding me?
The little ones are green.
The little skinny one?
Yeah, the little skinny ones are green.
Well, it's red-green deficiency, so there you have it. Actually, I handed my wife a coffee cup the other day and said, "Here's the green cup," and she goes, "That's great."
So these are what you see here is and that's why we put the word concept. So this is a concept of how that could be done. There are many other ways to do it, but it is absolutely a given that there will be bicycle and pedestrian facilities on this bridge, whether it's one structure or two structures, and that facility is going to connect, this part of Salem to the what we already have planned on Marine Drive. On the east side of Marine Drive, so that you can connect into Wallace Marine Park, and then to the Union Street Bridge and the Minto Island Bridge. So it's just a matter of now how that happens, and those are really design details. But that they're going to be there, they're absolutely going to be there.
Councillor Nanki, did that answer your question? Okay, Councillor Bennett.
Thank you. Thank you. Not to debate the point with Councillor Clem, but part of the motion, as I recall it, when we put together the Salem alternative, an integral part of the discussion was about maintaining the seismic integrity of the two existing bridges. We had a substantial amount of public comment during that discussion expressing real concern that this was a diversion of funds away from what is an existing facility, and one that is guaranteed to be here in 20 years, unlike this bridge. And we'd like it to be standing in 20 years. So I certainly understand it isn't part of the EIS, neither is the design. And we're sitting here talking about aesthetics and design all evening. I feel it's far more a compelling problem in the community that those bridges be maintained for seismic integrity as well as just basic safety. And right now, they're in neither. There's just real problems with those bridges. And I think everyone's worried about it. And if you recall, that was part of the discussion. So I think it's at least as tied to this discussion as whether or not there's going to be, what kind of street light's going to go on this thing if it were ever built.
Yeah, and Councilor, I want to assure you that, that as a part of that direction, a letter did go out. As soon as council adopted those recommendations, a letter did go out to ODOT expressing council's concern about that.
That was the motion.
So we are on the record.
Right.
Yep.
And I don't want to lose track of that during the next several years of talking about aesthetics, that our real interest too is maintaining those existing bridges.
Absolutely.
I see Councilor Clem and then Councilor Nanke and then Councilor Clem.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And yeah, just a quick follow-on to that, because if Cascadia goes, this bridge will never be built. All the money for my grandchildren's lifetime will be spent repairing and replacing what goes down. So I think it's massively important that we do something with those two. We may be using the Union Street Railroad Bridge for a couple of decades as they prioritize the money that we don't have for the repairs that'll need to go. So
I think you want to be looking at Mr. Chickering when you say that.
So it's definitely something the legislature needs to look at, and I know the resiliency plan and several groups are out there meeting on what the heck we do, and because it is a very real scenario. We're in the window already, so.
Councilor Clem, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Oversight team spent quite a bit of time talking about the seismic report because it had just been released when the bridge type was being discussed. And so my comments about this being a today problem is a call to action for all of us, particularly with the next legislative session. We can't just be a city council. We're going to have to be strong advocates in testimony and in helping ODOT find solutions and legislators finding money to either change the tiering and or find the funding. Recently, in the last decade or so, there's been a transportation package every session, and there were bridge packages. And so in some of the proposals I've seen, particularly from the Oregon Transportation Forum, there is definitely going to be a strong discussion in terms of seismic upgrades, not only for bridges, but for buildings as well. So look forward to thinking that the seismic problems of the Marion Street Bridge, as far as the oversight team discussions have gone, they've been just as important as talking about a future bridge that we're going to need.
Thank you for those comments, Councilor Clem. As I was listening to this, I was thinking to myself, we have something else to do in January, and that's going to be to put together an action plan so that the legislature understands our need on those bridges. Yep. I think we absolutely have to do that. Let's see, did someone else have their hand up? Councilor Bennett, did you?
I'm done.
You're done? Everybody? Did anyone else have? I want to be sure that Commissioner Pope gets a chance to speak. I apologize that you're the last to speak, but maybe we saved the best for last. But we so appreciate you coming and being a part of this. And
so I'll just start off by saying
you
thank you for the invitation. I really do appreciate it. I wish I had been invited a long time ago because I really agreed to come here. I knew that this was the right thing for me to do, to be here to listen and to hear your value statements in this project going forward. So I haven't had the opportunity to hear each of you speak specific, and again, this thing is 100 miles wide with regard to maybe that deep, with regard to the details that need to be discussed. And it's, I knew that when I agreed to be a member of the oversight team. I knew that this is a very dangerous place for me to go politically. But I love problem solving, and I know that this is a problem that we all have to work on together. Whether we end up with the perfect outcome or not is clearly it's something we can debate. But as I said in the beginning, I knew that this was something that I needed to help represent Polk County at the table for long-term planning. So that, to me, is the value in all this. So I'm genuinely interested in understanding everybody's concerns. I think, Councilor Bennett, I'm extremely sensitive to the points that you bring up, and I can tell you that I believe all of the oversight team members have been sensitive to all of these issues and trying to find the best pathway forward. I can reminisce over our decision for alternative 4D, and we knew there's no way this is going to fly. But unfortunately, it was, we had, a kind of a small selection group that we had to work from. And, we fully expected that there was going to be a lot of discussion about this going forward. We also knew that when we settled on a bridge type, as we worked through the elements of the discussion, we knew that there was likely to be this conversation and more going forward. I can tell you that I was very concerned as we went through this, and I did ask these questions on this particular bridge type, whether the design elements, because I'm a design engineer by trade, and I want to know if this box girder construction type allows us to have aesthetic elements and is able to build, we're able to build something that's a statement for the community. But I'm also aware that there were a number of constituents who talked to me through this process that said, I don't want to see that thing from my backyard or my front yard. I don't want to see that bridge. So, we've been trying to balance all of that as we go forward and make sure that, we have something, we're all agreeing on something that is a statement for the culture and the lifestyles of Salem, and also meets all the environmental concerns. And so I can tell you that the peers and environmental concerns did strike home with all of us. We were really trying to make certain that we stayed focused on that. But cost and feasibility has been a big deal for those of us, and on the Polk County side of this, trying to make certain that we're looking at this from a sensible point of view. We've all heard from lots of our constituents about, what are you doing? Why are you guys doing this? You don't even know what it's going to cost. So to the very point that Sonny brought up, it really is a chicken and egg problem, and we're trying to do our best to juggle through all of those things. I'm frankly not looking forward to December 3rd, so I'm grateful that you are, but I guess you don't have to get elected to keep your job. No, not I guess, I know you do. So I'm not looking forward to it, because I think that it's going to be a more than robust discussion. There's going to be a lot of challenges, and I'm confident a lot of unanswered questions as we move through it, but we have to do it, and it's just part of the process. So I hope that you will all give us the credibility of being sincere about our job in doing this. It is hard work. There's no question about it. It's really hard knowing that we have all of these balls in the air and all these concerns that we have to meet, and we're trying to do that. I know when I signed on to this task, I got warned by staff, behave, be careful, and don't be that commissioner that kills this project. And I absolutely wouldn't want to be that. But, so I want to make certain that we're talking about this going forward. And I have been given a task of seeing to it that I understand it's a regional project as well. And I do apologize for that. But as we go through this going forward in the future, to your questions about who pays for it, I think it's a very regional discussion, and I've never seen it as a Salem-only pay kind of a project. So hopefully I've given some background to what my interests are in this, but I've always also believed that this is something that we're probably not going to see. I get that this is a legacy project, and hopefully we can find a way to build it out that gives all of our higher level elected officials some comfort in giving us opportunity to raise the dollars too. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Anything else that needs to be said for the good of the order? I want to thank staff and all the work that you've done on this. And once again, yes, Julie, it's never ending. They're pointing fingers at one another. And I do appreciate the staff spending the time this evening so that we could have this work session. I think this was very helpful for all of us. So thank you. We are adjourned.
Thanks, Sonny.
Thank you very much.
No, it's not a problem.